Good morning, y'all. Welcome to The Intentional Creator. I think this is like episode 21. And this past week, I was at a conference at... Should I mention what it was? Yeah, I guess so. It was the INC, Independent National Convention, which was a new space for me to be in. It was a political... it's a political quote-unquote party. They're not trying to identify as a party. They're trying to identify as a movement, but it was a political party that they're starting, that they've gotten the ball rolling on, and really that's because of RFK Jr. being involved with the election this year and kind of the navigation of all that. And so this is not a political... taking
photos, right?
This is not a political podcast, by the way. This is a story-driven, creative podcast we're about to get into. I was there, I was documenting with a buddy of mine named James. He had a booth there, and he's got some initiatives in, the political world, people who are involved with helping to fund different conscious or intentional values in the political world. So he's involved in some programs there, one of those being X Labs, which is his space company. And they've got some cool things that they're doing. So that's why I was there. I was documenting for James and capturing media for James. And so I was in this space as a media production, person, trying to capture the story of what James was up to, but then also just the story at large. What is the independent movement? I've never really played in the political realm. So I was kind of trying to figure out while I was in there, what does this look like? What questions do I ask? How do I show up? Where do I go in this dynamic?
How do you tell a story in that space? Yeah,
exactly. And I still don't really know. I've got all this footage now, and I've got some footage from some friends of mine that I'm still kind of like, I don't really know how this is going to come about, because a lot of the stuff the interviews are talking about are not necessarily footage that we shot on site, right? It's all talking about the different parties that we've got going on in the United States, that kind of thing. And so this question kept coming up in my mind of social media, and really how social media has really affected the way we tell stories and the way we show up in stories, in the sense of like how social media runs is very much this clickbait, super kind of trigger happy place of just like dopamine, or just getting rushes. Very emotionally driven. It's not really got this groundedness in, hey, I'm trying to say something with this visual art piece, which is, I don't know about you, but why I love film and why I got into film was because I was inspired by films that I was watching when I was younger that moved me, that helped me think about things differently, that helped get me excited about stuff. So that was just something coming up with it. And then again, I'm trying to show up in a way, I am showing up in a way creatively in a lot of these spaces where I'm that's my intention. I'm like, there's something I want to say, and there's a vision, or there's something that I feel like we need to talk about. And how are we holding to that story? And so this question came up in my head of like, how has social media changed the way we relate to storytelling and the way we relate to expression of our stories? And
even just like capturing life in general, like I feel like it's shaped so much of the moments we choose to capture versus in the past, moments that stuck in the present, and like you were just there, and it's like you didn't really have a way of capturing it. It was almost those special moments had to be told through spoken word.
Totally.
Whereas now we like always have a camera with us. Every person basically has a camera with them and can capture these very intimate, intricate moments that once had a special magic about them of going uncaptured. And so there's like this weird line now of like, okay, how much do we actually capture of our daily lives, of these special moments of our story?
Or how much of it are we actually just like experiencing and learning from and trying to grow through? Totally. Yeah, and I think that you and I, this is kind of what the inspiration of this conversation was today, of just like we did the vlogging thing for a long time, and we were involved in that like very intimate relationship with capturing our lives all the time. And we were just kind of always thinking about that. And so, just kind of what that relationship looks like for those of people who do vlog, or people who do have relationship with Instagram, such as like somebody who does posting on there consistently, that kind of thing. How has it changed our relationship to the present moment? And how has it changed our relationship to our art and to our story and to what we're actually saying and showing up in every day.
Mm-hmm. So what did you find when you were at this convention? Like, what was the story and the content coming out of there? Like how do you think social media shaped what people were making?
I think the reason that this was such an apparent question in me was the fact that we're in that situation in the political world. There's very much a need for clear, defined stories that are not attached to anything to do with social media. Meaning, the political movement, you have to be very clear about what you're doing in those situations so that you can actually represent your idea and help that change policy and change and move through the board of directors, Congress, the whole like system that we have in place. So you need very clear ideas, very clear intentions, very clear focus points. And so I was realizing that a lot of us as media people, we were kind of just like wandering around and didn't really know our end goal. We didn't really have a clear end goal as to like what we were going to be doing with the footage that we were even shooting. We all knew it was important. We all felt that it was important, but we no longer were attached to why. And I think that was like a really interesting piece for me, because I was like, wow, like this is definitely needed. We need more awareness around what's happening in the political sphere these days. And we need to help destigmatize it and help create simplicity around it so more people can absorb it. Mm-hmm. And so I was just in this process the whole weekend of like, because I was filming interviews for the most part this weekend, in the sense of like I would chat with people and then be like, wow, this is a great conversation, like let's sit down and have an interview and I'll ask some questions about what you think about the independent movement, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was really pushing me to come up with the goal at the end of the day. What am I seeing at the end of this interview to help, my family or my friends or, people who see this film, to help better understand what's going on with this specific political party, the independent party. How can that help them? How can that change them? So I had to be put in this shoe and I was in the shoes of somebody who is trying to figure out what is the source and the true essence of this message and that kind of thing. And it just reminded me that that's why we do media. That's actually why we tell stories. That's actually why we are engaged in the process of telling stories, is to actually help convey something that can help change people and help shift people's perspectives and shift people's lives. And then on the back end of that, I was also interacting with all these other media guys, and we were all doing great work, and we were all having a good time and inspired and help like really feeling the change that we were feeling from the talks and stuff. But I could just tell that we were disconnected in the sense of why and what we were doing, in the sense of, okay, if we're all media people, in my opinion, media people are the most important people at any event. We're helping to convey the message. We're helping to convey this story. We're helping to share it. We're helping to do the marketing. And from what I can tell, the only thing we all have to do right now is like a marketing thing to come together as a people and help to ask for change in the larger sphere of where we're at as a culture. And so that just, again, was a question that kept coming up of just like, wow, we're so disconnected from the story we're actually trying to tell and the reason behind that story that we don't even know how to sync up as a crew and as artists to help bring this story to life and bring this story to more clarity.
And I feel like that's kind of the larger problem at hand as well with artists all over the world, is there seems to be this disconnection and like, what are we actually trying to say and do right now?
Right.
Like, how can we work together to tell the story instead of using social media as a tool to be even more individualistic and
competitive with one another?
Yeah. And so artists have become more individualist, which is cool. Like, cool to have your own expression and
100%
creative outputs, like, but when you're trying to fight for a why and a message and a cause, then it's like, team up with everyone. Like, the more people that you have, the stronger your message is going to be, versus you trying to do it all by yourself.
Totally. Yeah, well, it was a reminder. I was really reminded that dive back into studying archetypes, dive back into studying story design, dive back into studying these techniques in our human, history that we've developed to help convey messages and change through characters and their journeys through their own journeys, and then they can find out, wow, there's this new thing I discovered within myself at the end of the day. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways all of media has lost this in a lot of ways. Like I watch Hollywood movies and stuff coming out from the top too, and I'm like, wow. I mean, I feel like we all do this actually. We all watch movies like this and we're like very deflated. We're like, wow, this didn't actually help serve me. It was just kind of clickbaity. And it's like, that's the biggest of the biggest media production crews are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on this, and you're still just trying to clickbait me? Like, you don't actually have anything to say?
No, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that earlier. I feel like storytelling has just become so much more... It's like borders on free and chaotic. Like, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Like, totally. Free in the sense where there's so many more stories to tell. We have access to telling so many more stories. But at the same time, chaotic because there's so much less structure and intention behind those stories as to, like, what are we telling? So I feel like a lot of people nowadays, creatives and non-creatives, are just shooting to shoot. Like you said, like you guys were just walking around the convention, like capturing a ton of stuff, but it's like, what's the point? Like, why are you doing that? And then it's kind of just pointless, and you're making stuff just because you feel like you have to make stuff. And like, this is the problem with a lot of businesses as well that I'm realizing, is like, everyone realizes the power of social media. They know that they should be on social media if they're trying to run a business, say something, grow something.
Right.
But if you don't have a plan, a strategy, an intention as to what you actually want to do, then you're kind of just wasting your time and running around like a chicken without a head.
Literally.
And so there's like lots of stories that are being put out there. And when I say stories, like content, or even like movies, like you said, that just doesn't mean anything or say anything, and it's almost more just like a cry for attention from a lot of people than actually putting effort into something that really says something about the world, about where they're at, about helping people. And so we just end up with a world, an internet, a news feed full of shit. Full of stuff that doesn't matter and
totally,
like, really just rots our brains.
Well, and I really...
puts people in.
Exactly, yeah. And I look back into when we were doing the vlogging stuff, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I remember doing the vlogging stuff, and I was learning all these clickbaity things. I was like learning all the ways to like get people sucked in to your thing, and I was learning like what am I going to go do today that is going to be a clickbaity activity that will draw people in. Like. and so then it's not about what you're saying, it's about like, oh, look at me, what I'm doing, and like how can I spin this to make it clickbaity, but I'm not actually saying anything. So like, how am I giving value to someone right now? Right, totally. And I mean, it's weird to kind of have that firsthand experience of like, because everybody knows what clickbait is, but not everybody's like experienced the process of like going through that mental psyche of like creating that,
trying to create it.
And I was just reflecting on that, and the fact that, I knew we were going to be talking, and I knew we'd both kind of done that. Like, that's so weird to look back on that and realize that that's now the almost like some sort of like whirlpool that we're all spinning in that we don't know how to get out of yet, or that we're trying to figure out how to like build strategies to get out of and come back into like the vast ocean of what storytelling could actually be, and. It was weirdly making me both nostalgic of that time and also just kind of like really thankful again that we've had this initiative within ourselves creatively to be like, hold on, wait a minute. This is not actually serving me. Or you necessarily. Not like you know, but like just in general, like it's not serving the audience. Yeah, and I guess I'm curious for you and for me, but really, like, how has your relationship been since, because we've both been in that vlogging kind of YouTube world for a long time, and then since we've been out of it, it feels almost isolating, which is funny. It's like, well, hold on, I took a step back to try to slow this down, to try to figure out what I'm actually saying and what I'm showing up in, but it feels almost isolating in the sense of, like, now I'm not involved in the same rhythm that everybody else is.
Yeah.
And you're kind of looked at in a funny way. But from the YouTube stuff and like to where you're at now, like, how is that dynamic been to kind of just take time to breathe and figure out what you're actually articulating and saying? And obviously we're still doing stuff that has a sense of, like, we're creating traction and making money and, like, doing work that is pulling in clientele, but the center isn't at the same spot that it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it kind of comes back to what I said just now. It's like I'm not really just posting to post anymore. Like, most of the content that I post now has a purpose behind it, even if it's a purpose that the audience can't necessarily see. I am building something that's very intentional. So, I mean, I'll just straight up break it down for you. I am using my personal Instagram, social media as leverage to get in contact with and communicate with other outdoor brands. And so I'm very intentionally building my presence around outdoor sports, around nature, around that kind of lifestyle. So again, even if it just doesn't look like I'm providing that much value, I'm building out my presence to fit that niche so that I can intentionally connect with those brands. They can see my profile and be like, cool, he knows the space, he's knowledgeable, he's involved. Yeah, he's someone we would want to work with. So again, it depends on your intention. My intention is to use it to get business for Somewhere Studios, my creative studio. Your intention could be completely different. And, like, I still have, like, side intentions for my thing of, like, still trying to help people get outside and inspire people to get outside and go on adventures and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's the cool thing about where you're at and where you're at with that intention, is because it leaves so much space for your creative muscles to play in it. There's this underlying intention, there's this underlying direction, but there's also so much space in that for your creativity.
It just gives it like a box and a structure of, like, okay, this is what you're doing, and this is the direction you generally need to be going in. But yeah, in there, then you can play and have fun. And I think it also, when you, like, have an intention, it takes a lot of pressure and, like, mental stress off of, like, oh, what do I need to post? Because then it's like, you know what you need to post. You know what you want to speak about. If you're an activist speaking about climate change, it's like, cool, I'm posting about these things and these issues and these topics. I'm speaking about this thing. You're not going to post, I don't know, your cat. Like, you could, but then it loses the intention. It loses the grip or the relationship that you're building with your audience.
Absolutely.
Again, it depends on your intention if you want to build more of a personal connection. But I think it's when there is no direction, there is no intention, which has been me for a lot of my creative career, is just, and that's just part of being human as well, and part of growing up and being in your 20s is, like, not really knowing where you're going. And I think we've kind of used social media as a tool to figure out who we are as well. So it's not to say that, like, any of this is wrong, but it is really nice once you do find the direction you want to go in. I feel like things really start moving and happening then. When you can, like, narrow in and be like, cool, this is where I want to go.
Totally. Well, and I also think that, like, in that process of learning and figuring out what it wants to look like and what it wants to be, even holding the intention of I'm learning to tell impactful stories versus I'm just trying to get clout on social media. And again, like that's difficult. That's really difficult in the sense that, like, the human aspect is just wanting the connection. That's just wanting the, more access to more freedom or whatever. But if there could be any place in your mind as you're in that journey as well, to be holding this intention of, like, what am I actually doing with this, with myself? It's that relationship with you and the art form to develop a sense of what's actually being expressed, what's actually coming through, and how is it actually impactful to you, and then in retrospect everyone else too. Yeah, and I think, that the fact that I don't know, having gone through that whole YouTube thing and the clickbaity thing and all of those sorts of dynamics, I think really helped open up that door for the intentional conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it opened up this door to this intentional kind of dynamic that we're bringing to our creativity, which is super impactful and super powerful, I think, right now.
Yeah. I also wanted to speak a little bit about, like, I guess how we got to the point we are, and like take a look at the history of storytelling. Like, storytelling, without question, has shaped our entire society, our entire world. Like, nothing you see in front of you right now would be here if it wasn't for storytelling. So storytelling has really 100%. Been the foundation of change for humans, from when we were sitting around a fireplace, and like that's really where it all started. Is we'd tell stories of the gods, we'd tell stories of the distant lands, we'd tell stories of our enemies over the hills, and that gathered people and rallied people together. Like, story is everything. Story formed towns, societies, cities, built everything, every structure, everything that's intangible. Like, money is a story to shared belief, government is a story. All these things that exist that isn't like something you can physically pick up is a story. So yeah, I guess the point of this is just to say how powerful storytelling really is. And as it evolved, like, story is always just the only way we've been able to communicate story is through spoken word for most of our history as a species. Up until relatively recently, where we could then, I mean, I guess we had pictures as well, and drawings and stuff like that, until relatively recently, where film has become a thing. And film, when I say film, I mean like video, is such a powerful medium for storytelling. Like, combining visual and audio cues changes the world even more. Like,
right.
And then you have the introduction of movies and all that kind of stuff, and like, storytelling became this the most powerful storytellers became the ones that could use the media effectively. I mean, that's part of the reason, like, why America is like one of the superpowers of the world, is because they can make the best movies in the world. They can tell the best stories. And so filmmaking as an art became such a powerful form of storytelling, that it could influence the masses so much and direct people into a specific belief, and then impact real day-to-day action. What I'm trying to get to is that since the smartphone has been a thing, since social media has been a thing, that filmmaking power has now become democratized to everybody. Everybody has the power to make a film now, basically.
Right.
Even if that's just a video clip on your phone, you can use the power of visual and audio, which is something that our species has never been able to do on a mass scale like this, ever. Right. And so no one knows what's happening. No one knows what's doing, and no one knows what they're doing. And we're all trying to figure this out. And I think that's why it's so chaotic, is because this is the first time in our history that we all have access to such powerful mediums of storytelling. And like, this is why I think politics is getting so divided and so intense, is because people have access to tell stories. Like, it just fuels emotion and fuels belief. And I'm not saying good or bad either way. I'm just saying it really adds to the fire of any direction. Totally. Because we can all do this, as opposed to 50 years ago when it was all controlled by mainstream media or the politicians. Right. And so you can go on Facebook and make a video, or TikTok, and then 200,000 people see that. So it's become very chaotic.
Well, and originally the storytellers were the people in the tribe who had that skill set.
Exactly. Yeah, now no one's like trained on like how to tell stories, so it's just like unstructured chaos. It's
literally just a free form, and it's and not that that's bad, but I was actually at an event recently, and we were all sitting around a fire, and like there was just this open dialogue. You could just talk. You could kind of just express what you're feeling, express what you're saying. And there were some people who really got into something they believed in and let out this kind of channel, and then it just kind of started to spiral, and people would just kind of start to just talk about things because they were just wanting attention, or talk about things because they were just trying to have this like emotional, I don't know, hey, look at me kind of thing. And it didn't actually serve the depth of what that space could have been and would have been. And I think that that's a huge part of what you're saying, is the fact that like back in the day, the storytellers were a huge part of the culture of the tribe. How you know, at night you went and listened to the stories so you could hear different archetypes and hear different ways of showing up. And then there was this different
even religion as well as all stories.
Totally, exactly. And there were specific people who were helping to convey those messages as well. There's a level of skill that comes through with what stories you're telling and how you're telling them. And then, like you're saying, everything's gotten so democratized with just anybody can do it and everybody can do it. And now that's so oversaturated that we honestly are just like chickens with our head chopped off in a lot of ways, that we're just running around and not actually getting anything of substance done or said, because there's so much just coming at our systems, and there's so much happening and being absorbed through us. And yeah, I think that that's a really important piece, and I think that that's a really important story to tell, of the fact that storytelling used to be a very intentional practice that we all used as a way to help us grow and evolve as a species. And then now it's kind of used to our disadvantage in a lot of ways as to how society's showing up in it, so as to help us kind of keep us distracted and disconnected from one another, which is actually the opposite of what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help you focus what you're showing up in and connect you with the other people in your circle and in your life.
Yeah, and it's like, if you go back to the central storyteller of our history, like, for the most part, they were probably speaking about, like, maybe one or two stories a night. Whereas now, you see hundreds a day, and they're all 5 seconds long from all over the world. So, which, like, I guess, in a way isn't a bad thing, because you get, like, a lot of different perspective on the world. I mean, not that it's all good and intentional and like meaningful stuff.
You're getting different experiences though of what's going on.
Yeah, but I mean, I think my point again is that it's just like, it's chaos, and we've never been exposed to so much media in our history, and it's like, I think that's a big problem in our human psyche right now, is that we don't know how to deal with that.
Absolutely.
There's just like too much to process.
Yep. Well, and I mean, that was coming through even this past week, in the sense of being at the INC and recognizing that there was just so much information out there. There's so much coming at our systems. There's so much happening, and what do we focus on? And I think that that's I know that that's used to our disadvantage, in the sense of there's an awareness around that, and information continues to get pumped out into our systems, so that we continue to be distracted, and that we're continued to distract ourselves. And you know, I'm not saying I'm in this boat just as much as everybody else, in the sense of like, I get distracted all the time with social media and that kind of thing. I'm intentionally always working with it, and intentionally always trying to work with it. But our systems the human system is really something that needs intentional direction. It needs a sense of like, I'm fighting.
And that's
for
why
this.
we gravitate towards religion and towards powerful leaders and all these kind of things,
which both are representations of stories, in the sense of like, the religion is giving us a story to help us ground into
it's a framework.
It's a framework. It's a container, so that we can ground into our reason for being here, why what we're doing, what's going on, and so that we can take action out of that. Because if we don't, we have this sense of disorientation of what's going on, and until you can either figure out how to stabilize that within yourself and connect to that within yourself, you're just going to spin and float and just kind of bounce around. And so these containers, leaders also give us containers, in the sense of, wow, this is somebody I can follow. Like, this is somebody I believe in. I resonate with this. And that's what stories are supposed to be for. That's what stories are. It's like a sense of like, I've actually been saying a lot recently that every story is about you. Every story you ever hear, every story you ever watch is all about you. Because it's your reference point of what that character is going through.
Yeah.
and that tells you about you in the sense of how you're showing up in your day-to-day life and what you're learning off of that character's experience. And so, yeah, every and that means in the sense of like religion, leaders, that kind of thing. That's all a representation of where you're at and where your psyche's at and where your evolution's at. And so I think for me at the end of this, like the kind of the closing piece of this, of how I would think about this, is in the sense of like finding ways to slow the absorption down and be intentional about what you're absorbing, even in the sense of story. What are you absorbing in the sense of what are you putting into your psyche? What are you putting into your archetypal system? How are you showing up in your relationship to, honestly, what coding you're telling yourself? Stories are code. Stories are literally like coding that you're putting into a computer to tell the computer to do a certain thing. Like, what coding are you putting into your own psyche so that how you're showing up in certain ways or not showing up in certain ways?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, we're all trying to figure this out, and we don't have an answer for someone listening right now. It's like what the right thing is to do. And I think this is just the start of the conversation, and like hopefully creating more awareness about how much social media is actually affecting not only just the stories we tell, but literally our entire world, our society, how we function as human beings on this planet.
Right.
Like, social media has changed everything. And it's kind of crazy to think. So yeah, we don't have an answer, but hopefully this starts the discussion. We'd love to hear from you what you think of this topic. Ask your friends what they think of like how social media shaped the stories we tell and shaped the world in general. It would be interesting to like ask somebody that's older as well and get their perspective on it. Just thinking, asking someone that's like 70 years old. And
I feel like this one could be a recurring kind of question
we
could ask in podcasts we have guests on. Jot that.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, there's no kind of, this is a conversation, not necessarily a point that we're trying to close up and wrap up with a tight little bow. It's definitely something that's at large in our society right now, and I think it's a huge way of the kind of dance that we're all trying to move through in the sense of where our focus is at. And I think it's important to be thinking about the fact that like I should have just absorbed everything that comes my way. What do I believe? What do I actually want to like integrate into my life?
Be intentional about your choices, about your social media consumption and creation.
Yep. Every single
life will be
podcast.
Sweet.
every single podcast could just be intentional.
Actually.
Literally.
Cool. Okay. I feel like we're rambling now. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. Join the conversation, follow on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. And we'll
share with your friends.
Speak to you guys in the next one. Bye.
Peace.